when the court has finally heard her plea and meted out justice to this woman, why has the executive arm of the Indian government decided to set them free? That too as part of India's 75th year of Independence Day celebrations.
What to me is really problematic. We are cool with women of minorities being raped as spoils of war. We are cool with that. Not only are we cool with that, we celebrate it and we call these men sanskari Brahmins. That's an exact quote from one of the people that endorsed this. So to me, is this the sanskars we want? What is the kind of society that we want? Where do our morals lie?
The reason they were garlanded, this was photographed and this was publicly displayed, is because there's an audience for this. The audience is you and me. This was done as a performance for us to clap and say, yay, this is the country we wanted. Is this the country we wanted? That's the question. This is, let's be clear, this is not just about one woman or about Bilkis Bano. This is about the travesty that has become our democracy in its 75th year. Very big questions have to be asked of ourselves as voters and as citizens. Have we allowed the executive to become bigger than the judiciary?
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Table Talk. I'm Jyotsna. On the show today, we go back 10 years when the country collectively came together to demand the death penalty for Nirbhaya's rapists. Today, when Bilkis Bano's rapists have been freed and there is no move at that redressal, we continue to remain silent. This when the latest data shows that there has been an almost 20% increase in crime against women in the last year alone. Joining me on the show are two outspoken women, Tara Kaushal and Revati Laul, both authors who have deeply researched the intersection of hate, privilege, power, patriarchy, and now religion. I begin by asking them what message the release of Bilkis Bano's rapists continues to send to the country.
Essentially, I think what the heart and soul of the matter on the Bilkis Bano case is really about one big thing, which is when a woman has been raped, her family murdered. We all know what happened to her, but I will refresh the memory of everyone. In the year 2002, there was an anti-Muslim pogrom in the state of Gujarat in which 16 of the 24 districts of that state took part, fanned out in mobs, bloodthirsty, vengeful mobs, swearing to revenge the burning of Hindu activists on the Godhra train. They swore that they would avenge what they believed was a mob violence that took place at the Godhra train station, in which 59 VHP car sevaks were killed, and they believed without any evidence that this was Muslims that had done this. And they said, now we are going to take revenge on Muslims across the state of Gujarat. And there was a bloodletting of which mobs fanned out in the districts, including the one in which Bilkis Bano lived. What happened was that Bilkis Bano and her family was on the run from these mobs. She was 5 months pregnant and she had a 3-year-old daughter, Saleha, with her, who was snatched from her. Her head was dashed to the ground, broken to bits, and she was killed. 14 members of Bilkis's family were also killed. Many of her relatives were raped and she was also raped and left for dead. She survived. She fought in various courts, at the local courts, then at the High Court. The case was transferred out because of a perceived miscarriage of justice by the Gujarat police, and so the case was transferred to the Mumbai High Court, where in 2008 the 11 people were sentenced for life for committing heinous crimes of rape as well as murder. Now the real question is, when the court has finally heard her plea and meted out justice to this woman, why has the executive arm of the Indian government decided to set them free? That too as part of India's 75th year of Independence Day celebrations. So what is the message that this is sending out to the country? Is this sending out the following message, that if you are a minority woman, then if you are raped, the government can decide to remit the sentences of the rapists even when the court has upheld a certain verdict? Why this executive overreach? Secondly, if this executive overreach was decided only by people in the Godhra jail where these people were behind bars, then why has the state government and why has the Prime Minister, who on that very same day as part of the Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, spoken from the ramparts of the Red Fort to say it is my utmost duty to protect women, failed to act against this verdict? If he has failed to act against it, if he has failed even to say anything about this, what are we as a country to understand about the executive arm of the government? This is, let's be clear, this is not just about one woman or about Bilkis Bano. This is about the travesty that has become our democracy in its 75th year. Very big questions have to be asked of ourselves as voters and as citizens. Have we allowed the executive to become bigger than the judiciary? What does that mean for all of us? Does that mean that the executive can do whatever it likes and we cannot question it or are too afraid to question it? So not only are they released, their release is celebrated publicly. This is a public performance of hate. Of what kind of hate? Of religious hate. Of religious and gender violence. But essentially of religious and political hate. This is not just a question of rape. This is a question of political violence. It is a performance. The reason they were garlanded, this was photographed and this was publicly displayed, is because there's an audience for this. The audience is you and me. This was done as a performance for us to clap and say, yay, this is the country we wanted. Is this the country we wanted? That's the question.
So many questions there, Tara. Would you just come in? I mean,
for me, this is, of course, a lot of the questions that Revati raised are very, very important. But for me, I think it's about, beyond Bilkis and beyond what has happened, to me, it's about the morals that we seem to endorse. To me, the morals that we seem to have inherited and are endorsing in the country that we currently have with the person we elected and continue to support, the morals that we endorse are what to me is really problematic. We are cool with women of minorities being raped as spoils of war. We are cool with that. Not only are we cool with that, we celebrate it and we call these men sanskari Brahmins. That's an exact quote from one of the people that endorsed this. So to me, is this the sanskars we want? What is the kind of society that we want? Where do our morals lie? And that's been the essential question that has been, confronting us since the run-up to the 2014 elections, which is, what do we stand for as a nation? Do we stand for hate? Do we stand for this anti-minority rhetoric? Clearly we do. And that to me is a really big question. Also, when you say you're protecting Nari Shakti and you go to the Red Fort and you say we need to protect Nari Shakti and there is no progress without women joining this nation, right? Without women participating in this nation with safety and autonomy. When you say that, why you celebrate someone who has taken away those things? And we're not only talking about the autonomy of Bilkis. There were people murdered. Her daughter was murdered. So when we say this, what are we saying about what we believe? That moral hatred and violence is completely acceptable and we're cool to endorse all of this, and we will put our votes where we will repose our faith for economic progress or whatever other crap has been promised. We will put our votes into these ethics. And to me, that's the bigger problem, that the majority, we're acting like a mob. And then there are people who are not speaking out of fear because Facebook is restricting posts about Bilkis Bano and the incident. So we're not acting out of fear, and there's the executive and capitalism, and everybody is just clapping everyone's back while there are real life consequences to this, as we have seen.
Revati, as Tara's also saying, I mean, going back to how we as a civil society responded during Nirbhaya's time. You know, everybody came out on the streets. There were protests. There was jantar mantar. Everybody wanted, you know, to get the rapists hanged. To now, how
Yes,
in your
and yes,
conversations
Jyotsna,
with civil society, how do they justify it?
I think in this country, rape has become a graded crime, and I'm going to position 3 rapes against each other. The Nirbhaya case, in which Jyoti Singh, although from a backward community, the OBC group of castes, was a middle class PVR going woman, so everyone felt that she's one of us and she's Hindu. Last year, in the district of Hathras in Uttar Pradesh, a Dalit woman was raped because she was seen as the rapist was seen initially as people who were part of power structures and the establishment in some form. Parts of the establishment tried to cover this up. When that failed, the police was sent in and they feared the outbreak of violence. So the head of police surrounded the body, doused her body with petrol while her father was crying and thumping his fists on the police jeep, and he was not allowed to cremate his own daughter. That is the fate meted out to a Dalit woman, and who remained nameless for her caste. And then when it comes to a Muslim woman, the rapists are remitted, set free. Our government at the highest level has said nothing about it. What kind of country are we? Do we decide who gets justice depending on what religion and caste they are from? Clearly, that is who we are. And if this is what, if the silence of the Prime Minister speaks something to us, it is telling us this is what we as a nation have chosen. This is what he is responding to and perceiving that we want. So we have to blame ourselves. Let's not look outside of ourselves, because it's very easy to say, oh, this is a terrible government. But what about us who created it? What about us who have these fantasies of hate? What about us, the people for whom this large spectacle is being performed in political spaces time after time, from one lynching and rape to the other?
I mean, you're forgetting entirely the case of that 8-year-old nomadic Muslim girl who was killed in Katua, right? We all know her name. We will not use it. But my point is, the BJP took out protests in favor of the perpetrators. So we know exactly what is priority. What is priority is not the human rights of everybody. The priority is this performance about claiming to have a Hindu identity, and these men needing to be applauded as soldiers of the misogyny, as soldiers of these political parties and the agenda that they have. So the question is the lens that we look at. Who is a soldier and who is a terrorist? It's the lens that we look at something through, right? And to me, the lens that India is viewing and the lens that is being normalized, simply also because not in my circles and not in yours, I hope, but certainly not in mine, there's no one who has been in support of this thing that's happened recently, the release, right? No one has been in support. But there's also the fact that there is a certain amount of fear that this is what everyone wants. And if this is what the executive wants, and if this is what the mob wants, and everyone wants it, then you stay quiet out of silence. And this is hugely problematic.
Also, it stands out that women no longer speak for women.
But
I think women have been speaking in the last castes, communities across the spectrum. And I'm not talking about women who are like either you, Jyotsna, or like you, Tara, or like me. These are women who come from very different backgrounds as us. So we must not imagine that they are not shocked by what's happened. They are. I think we have also failed as a nation to join the dots between what happens each time until it becomes too much. And so when we tell people this is what happened, most of them are shocked beyond belief, because they don't imagine that people they put their faith in to protect women haven't done what they're supposed to, and have, in a sense, let us down spectacularly. There's no other way of looking at it. And so women are speaking out. But yes, patriarchy is also something that women have had to have taken on, and sometimes been forced to be subject to, because they have no choice. It's either that or nothing.
What is our primary leading moral, right? A lot of the women at the protest for the Muslim girl in Kathua, a lot of the protesters were women. So when you think about what that means, it means that their hate and their Hindutva or their Hinduism and their hate and their Islamophobia trumps their alignment with other women. They feel less empathy towards another woman, another Muslim woman from a different religion, than they do with the men of their own religion. So this to me beggars the question about human rights, and also the amount of violence that is perpetrated with a sense of moral outrage, with a sense of morality, is dangerous. So for me, anyway, violence is a problem, but for it to be endorsed repeatedly by the state, by the majority that has voted for this, by the majority that is silent, by the majority that is not only silent but is actively endorsing what is going on, these are problems. And you know, in 2014, I knew a few people who voted for the BJP because, you know, tired of Congress and we'll try it once. But by 2019, there was no facade of economic, rejuvenation for the country, which was what they had promised in 2014. There was no facade. So the people who voted in 2019 knew fully well, not that they needed to, we know what happened in 2002, but the people who voted in 2019 are particularly complicit in what is happening today and where the nation has reached today. So I think those who have, and there are people who are having moral crises about, Bilkis now, but you voted for this. So the affirmative action that comes from you, if you're finally triggered and finally outraged, needs to be proportionately more. And I don't know what you can do now. I think the horse is already bolted, but there's still stuff to be done, and all hope is not lost.
Revati, we go back a little bit to 2002. That's where your book is also centered. If you look back at all the research that you did then to where we are now, what do you see?
I see that, basically what I did was to follow 3 members of the anti-Muslim pogrom and look inside those spaces of hate to try and understand it. And I think that is what we, 20 years later, have as a nation not done enough. We have not looked at what is it that triggers people and motivates them to move towards these spaces of hate. And I think it's time that we look inside these spaces and open them up, and we'll find that hate is amorphous, it can change. One of the protagonists of my book took part in the mob, and then once he was exposed to other ideas, he flipped and did a 180-degree turn and became a left liberal atheist, works with other people who were formerly filled with ideas of hate and helps transform them. So the thing is, if we keep repeating ad nauseum that this is a fixed space, we're also fixing it. Also amongst my protagonists is a heinous criminal who cut and killed and raped women and said, I pulverized Muslim women till they were pickled. Suresh Jadeja was serving a 31-year sentence for having done this while being married to a Muslim woman. He's also now free. When he got out on parole, he again raped his wife, who he had raped multiple times for being Muslim. And while he was married to her, he also attacked me. And I went to the Sabarmati jail authorities and asked them to please cancel his parole. And they said, oh, well, we're on chutti. So this is not just something that's happened now. The point I'm making is that we have to look at why Suresh became like that. Why do people like this become like this? Part of it has to do with the fact that we are not looking at the pain and the circumstances that make people the way they are. Suresh comes from a community of called the Charas. They are a denotified criminal tribe. They were criminalized by the British in 1871 for being nomadic tribes, and the British were scared that these nomads will be couriers of information for revolutionaries, and there might be another 1857 revolt on our hands. So therefore, they incarcerated them to prisons, and they dubbed all people from such tribes as criminals at birth. So then these people became criminals over time because they had no other recourse to any other profession anymore. After independence, they continued to be picked up and summarily brutalized by the police whenever the police needed a scapegoat for anything that happened. So then in the city like Ahmedabad, in a neighborhood called Charanagar, it abutted Naroda Patia, where a massacre happened on the 28th of February 2002, where, like Bilkis, Suresh raped and mulled out the fetus of a pregnant woman. The point is, why did he then brag about it later to a mob? And why did he brag about it to the press saying, I pulverized women? That's the same thing as 20 years later, Bilkis's rapist being garlanded. Why people are attracted to this hate? They aren't attracted to the hate, they're attracted to power, they're attracted to moving up the social and economic ladder from spaces of extreme distress. There are people who need an identity. And in this country, for very many decades, the political elite has been occupied by the Congress, and the political elite was also a feudal landowning class, and they were people who basically were secular and socialist. Now, in order to upseat them, it's not a coincidence that after 1991, when India's economy opened up, we suddenly had a burgeoning middle class that the elite shunned because they were too religious, because they were not atheists, they were not cool enough, their identities were always in question. In order for them to be, they needed to upseat the ideas of the elite. And therefore, they have ejected and thrown those ideas out. And therefore, they're the opposite of secular and socialist. Now, if we don't understand that, and if we don't include the middle class, and if we continue to shun aspirational castes, look at the castes and classes that make up the majoritarian political mainstream today, look at why they are defining themselves constantly against people like you and me. Because we are also bigoted in our hatred of them. The more we continue to other them, the more they will fan out like this and celebrate the opposite of what we like in order to exist. So we have got to be inclusive. We have to understand where this pain is. That is the main thing I learned from occupying those spaces. One of the protagonists of my book burnt houses of Muslims. But that's because as a tribal, as a Bhil in Gujarat, he came from an area where the Muslims looked down upon him. They didn't allow him to sit in front of him. Later, when in one day, the political and social tables were overturned. So he got a lot out of that violence. As long as people are emasculated and made to feel small by us, they will continue to use whatever means they have in order to exist. If the Hindu right is converting people to their ideas by talking to people unlike themselves and then converting people, why are we not creating an alternative ascending staircase? Why are we only talking to each other and living these rarefied bubbles? If we continue to talk only to ourselves, it's no surprise we're being evaporated and eviscerated from this space. We have to be able to talk to people unlike ourselves if we really want to put our money where our mouth is and change. We have to make ourselves deeply uncomfortable. We have to move out of these rarefied spaces we occupy, go live elsewhere, talk to people unlike ourselves, and only then can we put back what we have broken. First, we have to take ownership of the fact that Jyotsna, you, me, and Tara have broken this country. And not other it.
Yeah. Tara, I mean, would you walk that talk?
Yes, I do understand this otherizing. I wrote Why Men Rape, so I did go and see the rage that's at the base of all of their anger. I do agree, no doubt, that we have played a role, and the privilege that we have carried intergenerationally that has left out people who didn't have our education, that have left out their kids, and that have left them out of this economic, any sort of economic stability that I think is also a human right, is of course partly to blame. But I don't see how stirring the pot, I mean, I do not take away from the fact that these unemployed youth who are angry are being stirred and whipped into a frenzy, and have been for a long time, by the powers that be. So to me, this is problematic. I mean, when the army issue happened, was it earlier this year? But when the army issue happened, men in UP burned 500 crores worth of trains. So the rage and the anger is not only directed at women. It is also about their life circumstance. It is the same reason that conservatives will talk about, in America, will talk about making America great again. Here, it's this idea of the Hindu nation state that has been plundered from time immemorial and continues to be so. So there is this victimhood and this victimization that comes out in rage. It comes out against everybody that you can express this rage towards, this violence towards. So you see it whether it's road rage, or you see it whether it's people raping women during mob violence, right? It's all the same thing. Now, patriarchy and power and anger have a very close association. Norms of masculinity have a very close association with not only the way men behave in general, but the way they behave towards women, as we can see. So now the norms of masculinity that we are adopting and endorsing include saying good sanskari Brahmin men were just doing their duty by raping these women. And that's what we're saying today, which is to me hugely problematic. And that's where the problem lies.
Tara, I'm going to, you also lived, as Revati was saying, she's lived in that space. You also lived in that space, speaking to a lot of rapists for your book. And I want to end this by asking you, in your assessment, the rapists are out. Where does this leave Bilkis Bano today?
What is justice? What is the idea of justice? As a woman, and as a Muslim woman who was gang raped, lost her baby, lost her child, lost her unborn child, watched her sister get raped, watched her mother get raped. Is this what, not only are you feeling, so what is justice? Is justice time for time? But also, is justice simply keeping men away and incarcerated so that they are away and don't prey on other people and don't go back and re-victimize Bilkis? So what was justice for her for what happened? And what is justice for her for the 6 years that she fought to get them convicted? And what does she feel today about the nation celebrating her rape and the men who raped her and murdered her child? This case is more problematic, not because rape has happened, and that happens, but that we continue to think it's the right thing. We continue to endorse it. Nazi war criminals are jailed in their 90s. But today, clearly, we have no problems with letting these men go and celebrate. They made mistakes, and, boys will be boys. Hey, it was a mob. So, a very sad state of affairs and a sad day.
I think we as a country, regardless of what the Supreme Court does with the Bilkis case, have to ask ourselves what kind of nation we want from this day on. And whether Bilkis gets justice or not, we cannot afford to say, okay, now supposing she gets justice, then we go back to our stony sleep and say, okay, all's well with the world. No, it is not. We have to continue to ask ourselves the question, what did this executive do, and never forget it.
And I want to just reiterate once again that Bilkis Bano was raped when she was 5 months pregnant. She was 21 or 22 years old. Her mother and her sisters were raped in front of her. 7 members, she says 14 members of her family were murdered, including her 3-year-old daughter who was sitting in her lap. She was taken, flung on the ground with the intent to kill. The men who did this are out. They are murderers. They are rapists. How long are we going to keep silent? How long are we going to pretend that this does not matter simply because she is a Muslim? Revati Laul and Tara Kaushal, thank you so much for joining me. And just raising your voices as you guys do, and more power to you guys, and keep doing the spectacular work that the two of you keep doing.
Thanks, Jyotsna. Thanks, Revati.